Mobile phones, or rather smartphones, have become an inseparable part of our daily lives. Along with the rise of its usage, another thing that has become a common part of our lives is the fear of mobiles. This is mainly based on some notions that mobiles are a source of radiation which can cause cancer, depression, and other harmful effects to our body, mainly to the brain, heart, and our reproductive systems. In this snippet, we will try to see how much of this is true. We will also see some rumors centered around mobile phones. But first, let us discuss the fears surrounding mobile radiation. When we talk about radiation, we are referring to the electromagnetic radiation or the energy of electromagnetic waves. Like all other radiation, electromagnetic waves have this property called as frequency. We classify different electromagnetic waves according to their frequency into different groups. It starts from gamma rays, which have the highest frequency, down to radio waves, which have the least frequency. What we call as visible light is also part of this spectrum and lies within a definite range of frequencies. Here, please note that the frequency is inversely proportional to the wavelength. That is, the smaller the frequency, the higher the wavelength. Wavelength decides how far the waves can travel, and hence radio waves are commonly used for long distance communication as they have lesser frequency and higher wavelengths. Now, the frequency has a direct proportionality to the energy that the waves contain. The higher the frequency, the higher will be its energy state. So, gamma rays, which have a higher frequency, have a higher energy. That is why we use these rays in radiotherapy, which is commonly used in cancer treatment to burn away cancer cells within specific areas of the body. Waves lying next to the gamma rays in the spectrum, like ultraviolet rays, X-rays, have also high energy levels but are lower than gamma rays. So these three rays can have a negative impact on our well-being, as they can break certain molecular structure within our body if exposed to without any protection. This destruction of chemical bonds is called as ionization. Hence, these rays are called as ionizing radiation. On the other hand, the set of rays starting from the visible light section to the radio wave section in the spectrum do not have any ionization powers. Hence, they are called as non-ionizing radiations. Now coming on to mobile phones, they use radio waves for their intercommunication. As already mentioned, radio waves are low frequency, low energy waves which fall under the non-ionizing category. Just above them sits the infrared rays, and above that, in terms of frequency and energy, sits our visible light, which we all rely in order for us to live. One curious thing to note here is that all our bodies emit very small amounts of infrared radiation constantly. If you see your body image using a thermographic camera, you can easily see this emission. If you want to quantify this, you are releasing as much infrared radiation as does a 100-watt bulb. It is just because our eyes do not have the capacity to see those rays that we are unaware of this radiation coming from within each one of us. Even though we mentioned that the radiations from radio waves till visible light are non-ionizing, they can still cause a thermal effect due to the energy present within them. They have the power to rotate certain molecules like water molecules especially in the case of microwaves. We have already covered this on our video on microwaves, so you can refer to that in case you haven't seen it till now. So, when these molecules are rotated, there is an increase in the internal temperature of that body. So in reality, microwaves which are present in the mobile phones can cause this thermal effect on the bodies that it comes into contact with. This is where science comes to the rescue. Scientists who are working in this field have determined certain mandates for mobile phone manufacturers so that the exposure to that radiation is controlled. Here is where SAR, or specific absorption rate, comes into the picture. SAR is a measure of the rate of radio frequency energy absorption by the body from a mobile phone or mobile tower. SAR provides a straightforward means for measuring the RF exposure of mobile phones to ensure that they are within the safety guidelines set by the FCC, or Federal Communications Commission. This is the body that regulates communication using the radio frequency. The FCC guidelines have stipulated a maximum level of exposure for a human body. As per US and Indian standards, it is 1.6 watt per kilogram. As per EU standards, it is 2 watts per kilogram. This means that mobile phones which have a higher SAR value than 1.6 cannot be sold in India. Now, how can we find out the SAR value of your phone? Just use the USSD code or quick code. Just open your keyboard and type *#07# and press the call button, and you will get the information about the SAR value of your handset. Many people mistakenly assume that using a cell phone with a lower reported SAR value necessarily decreases a user's exposure to RF emissions, or it is somehow safer than using a mobile phone with a higher SAR value. While SAR values are an important tool in judging the maximum possible exposure to RF energy from a particular model of cell phone, a single SAR value does not provide sufficient information about the amount of RF exposure under typical usage conditions to reliably compare individual cell phone models. Rather, the SAR values collected by the FCC are intended only to ensure that the cell phone does not exceed the FCC's maximum permissible exposure levels even when operating in conditions which result in the device's highest possible but not its typical RF energy absorption for a user. We will come to that in a little bit. SAR testing uses standardized models of the human head and body that are filled with liquids that stimulate the RF absorption characteristics of different human tissues. In order to determine compliance, each cell phone is tested while operating at its highest power level in all frequency bands in which it operates, and in various specific positions against the dummy head and body to stimulate the way different users typically hold a cell phone, including to each side of the head. To test cell phone for SAR compliance, the phone is precisely placed in various common positions next to the head and body, and a robotic probe takes a series of measurements of the electric field at specific pinpoint locations in a very precise grid-like pattern within the dummy head and the torso. All data for each phone placement are submitted as part of the equipment's approval test report for final authorization. Only the highest SAR values for each frequency band are included in the final authorization to demonstrate compliance with the FCC's RF guidelines. So what you see in your SAR level is the exposure that the phone generates whilst operating at its highest power level. Normal levels would be much lower than this. All cell phones must meet the FCC's RF exposure standard, which is set at a level well below that at which laboratory testing indicates and medical and biological experts generally agree adverse health effects could occur. One important point to note here is that the standards that have been set is actually 1/50th of the maximum absorption rate found during studies. Now let us come to studies conducted on mobile phone radiations. Yes, there has been many studies that have come out in this regard. But when we analyze many of the studies, one can find many inconsistencies and contradicting claims. Why is it so? That is because science is constantly looking at all areas of studies on mobile radiations, as it is very critical considering the increased use of mobiles in recent times. So all studies in this regard gets published so that the subject matter experts can review the same. When we do a meta-analysis or a comparative study of the studies, that is when we find the inconsistencies. Mostly, these studies usually bring out the correlation between the health issues and mobile usage. They usually are unable to find a causation to substantially claim that it is indeed the mobile phone which caused a particular health issue. In science, correlation is not taken as causation. For example, if you looked at a graph of cancer patients and the number of mobile users within them, you will find a strange correlation, as almost all of them would have been mobile users. However, more evidence is needed to effectively prove that it is indeed the mobiles which caused the cancer. Another feature of many of these studies is that persons conducting the studies start from the bottom to top approach. This means that they start the studies by asserting that mobiles cause health issues and then try to find the reasons. This is a case of leading the evidence instead of letting the evidences lead us, which is the actual scientific way. When we approach it in a bottom to top approach, there are many biases and precognitions that creep in, which can result in an incorrect analysis of the data. These are not our findings. These are findings made by the World Health Organization, who did a meta-analysis of over 25,000 studies conducted over a 20-year period as part of their International Electromagnetic Fields (EMF) project launched in 1996. To date, research does not suggest any consistent evidence of adverse health effects from exposure to radio frequency fields. Further, research has not been able to provide support for a causal relationship between exposure to electromagnetic fields and self-reported symptoms. If you cite the thermal effect as a possible cause of danger, then studies have found that at frequencies used by mobile phones, most of the energy is absorbed by the skin and other superficial tissues, resulting in negligible temperature rise in the brain or any other organs of the body. Epidemiological research examining potential long-term risks from radio frequency exposure has mostly looked for an association between brain tumors and mobile phone use. However, results of animal studies consistently show no increased cancer risk for long-term exposure to radio frequency fields. With the recent popularity of mobile phone use among the younger people, and therefore a potentially longer lifetime of exposure, WHO has prompted further research on this group. Several studies investigating potential health effects in children and adolescents are still underway. So where does IARC, or International Agency for Research on Cancers, place mobile phone radiation in the list of known and possible carcinogens list? In this list, it is placed in category 2B in the possible carcinogenic to humans grade. This grade means that there is some evidence for a risk, but it is not that convincing as per Cancer Research UK. Now, before you jump the gun and say, aha, please see some daily used items which are in the same grade. Fuel oil, petrol, diesel and exhaust emissions, cocamide DEA, which is used as a foaming agent in soaps and hand washes, magnetic fields and lead. You can check out the full list online. Apart from radiation exposure, mobiles have also earned a bad name for giving people neck pain and bad eyes. This can easily be fixed by altering the position that you use the device. Looking down at your device for a long time can cause conditions similar to carpal tunnel syndrome, and long-term exposure may result in tired eyes. However, all that can be avoided by taking sufficient breaks or by wearing anti-glare glasses. Before we wrap up, let us look at some rumors surrounding mobile communications. Most people don't have an issue with mobile phones, but they have an enmity towards mobile towers. They resent having a mobile tower within their neighborhood, but they also complain when they don't get a good network. The irony of the matter is that mobiles have more radiation than mobile towers. How much? Almost 1,000 times more. The reason why mobile towers are relatively harmless is due to two things. One, mobiles are closer to you than mobile towers. One of the characteristics of the radiations is that the radiation released reduces by the square of the increased distance. That is, when the distance increases by 2 times, the radiation decreases to 1/4. They are inversely proportional to the square of the distance. Secondly, the antenna or the device that transmits signals in a mobile is negligibly small when compared to antennas of mobile towers. So it needs to release more radiation than the tower to communicate effectively. So, effectively, when you are in an area where the network coverage is less, the SAR value increases as the mobile operates at a higher power level. So, by not having a tower within the range of your mobile, you are increasing the radiation that your mobile emits. So, if you are among those who have opposed to having a mobile tower near your house, think again. Finally, we can come to yet another marketing ploy driven by this fear of mobiles. You might have seen ads of certain devices that claim to reduce or protect you from the radiation of your mobiles. So, can you reduce the radiation by using these devices? The simple answer is no. The working principle of a mobile is to work using electromagnetic radiation. If you are able to stop the electromagnetic radiation coming into or out of the mobile, you can escape from the radiation. For this, you can use an aluminum foil to wrap your mobile in it, or use a device called Faraday cage, which is found in all microwaves. If that is also not possible, you can switch the power off and thus escape from the radiation. The only problem is that if you do this, you won't be able to make or receive calls or check your messages. So what? You are safe from radiation, right? On a serious note though, if you're still afraid of the radiation exposure, there are some simple tips that can be offered to you. In addition to using hands-free devices such as earphones or Bluetooth headsets, which keep the mobile phones away from the head and body during phone calls, exposure is also reduced by limiting the number and length of calls. Or you can use the loudspeaker mode to talk, all of which increases the distance between you and the device, which we have mentioned reduces the radiation considerably. Using the phone in areas of good reception also decreases exposure, as it allows the phone to transmit at reduced power. But if you are one of those people who are really phobic about radiation, the best way is to avoid using a mobile phone. This would help in reducing the number of WhatsApp messages that get circulated, which increases the fear-mongering among people. For the rest of us brave folks, do continue to use mobiles, as currently science is smarter than your smartphone. Our next episode is a comprehensive vlog on vaccines, so please watch out for that. Till then, may the force of science be with you.